Let's get busy.
What's up, Mike?
Hi, how's it going, man?
How are you?
I'm doing good so far. It's been a good day.
Good.
It's been a good day.
Welcome to Shooting from the Lip. Thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me on.
When I was, I have to admit, when I'd reached out to you to get you to do this, I didn't realize a certain connection that we had until earlier today when I was, putting my show posts on Facebook and I'm looking at your page and I'm like, I know her.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, good girl.
Yeah, she's awesome. She's awesome. Kat. Yeah, that's how I ended up in Louisville. I mean, like, in theoretical...
That's a good reason.
Yes. Notice I said Louisville, not Louisville.
Louisville.
Yeah,
You said it right?
I don't get shanked by anybody anymore. So years ago, as I'm sure you're aware, I've been spinning fire and juggling for a long time. And in that process, I would come down and I would teach workshops here, and they'd host them at Turner's or out at Terrapin Hill. Like, we had an iteration of Flow Camp, we had Halfway to Flow Camp and Snow Flow, these different events. And I came down originally because a friend of mine I grew up with, the guy that actually taught me how to spin poi, his wife wanted to go to a retreat but didn't want to go by herself, and her husband didn't have a lot of interest going in a hoop retreat. And I was like, I'll go and check it out and see what happens. There's contact juggling and something else, and it ended up being like 90% like hoop workshops, which I didn't really mess with, plastic circles at the time. And I came down, and then in that process, the guy that was teaching the poi classes the next year was like, hey, you guys should teach these poi classes because I'm not available. And that started this whole run of basically teaching these workshops down here like every year at Flow Camp or Halfway. And then in the process of that, I met Kat years ago. I mean, we'd probably known each other, I'm guessing, like going on probably like 8 or 9 years, if not more.
Okay.
And came down, we were friends. She's a metalhead. We had a lot of interesting things in common. We had a lot of friends that were in common, and we've always been acquaintances and kept in touch. And then through the process, we ended up on almost like a workshop tour, like teaching these different events, and then things just kind of melded, and then I started coming down.
Well, the poi thing is what got my attention with you. It looks very interesting.
Absolutely.
But explain that to our audience who is not familiar with it.
So in a common sense, essentially, poi is nothing but a ball and a string. It is literally like a stage ball, which is a plastic sphere, a little bit made out of silicone, a little squishy, but it still doesn't feel the greatest getting blasted by it, connected by a tether or a rope. And there's a plethora, a ridiculous amount of tethers you can choose from static rope to cotton rope, everything. And then a handle of some form. And what we use now is like what they have detached from a juggling club and attached on the end of that cord. And those are considered like contact poi. I guess I should have probably like brought a pair to show everybody to make sense. But it's a ball on string, and then it's a movement-based art that there is kind of like these guidelines. And those guidelines are different moves considered of what's called weaves and butterflies or flowers. And they kind of divide up the ability to do these different things and then mesh them together. And then once you get really, really, really familiar over time at practicing and indoctrination with these ideas, concepts, this linguistic, I mean, it gets like really deep down the rabbit hole with some stuff. But once you get familiar with it, then that kind of transforms into what we call the art of poi or performance art. And that doesn't only delineate just one form, because you have hoops, you have staff, you have juggling, contact juggling, and of course, I'm sure fire breathing and eating is also incorporated in that, whips, rope dart, all these things. But long story short, poi is basically ball and string, spinning the ball and string in these certain, I guess you say moves is what we call them, like 3B weave. And then from there, you just kind of tear in, and depending where you go, it gets really out of hand one point.
It looks very physical, too.
It is.
Well, what's the history, though? Where did this all originate?
So there's been a few people that have done some amazing research. There's one lady, God, I wish I would remember her name. You can look it up, but she's done enough research that she's done a neurolinguistic and research of the effects upon the brain from it, which is fascinating.
Really?
And then a few others have done some research where they've looked into history and seen where in India, where they have this old rituals or these dances that are kind of like a blending of like yogic movement with like palm torches or these like bowls with this ceremonial fire on them. We find that fire walking on coals, or fire bathing in other cultures. And then we found that poi comes from the Maori, from, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, from New Zealand. And they do it still to this day. Now, if you look up in certain dialect indigenous cultures, poi means it's a type of food. Mm-hmm. But to us, poi is ball and string.
Right.
And if you look up the traditions from New Zealand and Australia, I think more specifically New Zealand with the Maori tribe, they use it as a ceremonial dance. So when you see fire spinners back in the day, that's what you saw. You saw men shirtless in these hula hoop skirts with these fire batons or fire knives or staffs, and they had the women that had these balls on this yarn string doing this very rhythmic, very choreographed dance that was like almost like a ceremony that they had as part of their tribe. Now, at some point, that skill set started to grow and grow and grow till people started spitting fire with it, and then it kind of leached over into the Europe area and Germany and France. And you know, there's a huge circus and, like, I wouldn't say flow scene, but now juggling scene. But there's such a heavy amount of people doing like juggling and spinning over in Europe from the circus schools. And then from that, it kind of broke into, from what I understand, into like the rave scene, glow sticking. Right. You know what I mean? Back when EDM was huge, like 10 years ago, you know, Paul Oakenfold, Benny Benassi, people like that. And then from there, it started breaking waves into the States years ago. I think the first person I saw ever do it was a guy named Nick Woolsey, and he's been doing it for years. And now he's from the States, but I think he's kicking it in Canada and kicking it in some places over in Sweden and Switzerland. And there's a few others, and you have these like iconic people that really brought it here back way then. That was before, I would say, the internet was really developed, because there was like no one that really did it, and you only had a group of small friends. And there was this website called I think it was called firetribe.net. And it was not even a fancy thing. It was literally like a listing of a blog, you know what I mean? Just like letters. And you'd have to go through and search like fire spitting or something like that. And you might find like 4 or 5 people. And me and my buddy would sit there and hit refresh every other day, waiting for this guy from France, waiting for this guy from Japan, waiting for this guy from Switzerland to like drop out new content. Right. And that's when it kind of broke waves. And now it's huge now.
So when did this kind of gravitate to the States? And
to my knowledge, it was probably at least 5 or 10 years before I got into it. Yeah. So I'm going to say around 20 years ago, if not like 15-ish.
Okay, wow.
When I came
in the 2000s.
Yeah, I came across it in my early 20s. A guy that taught me was a dude, we had some martial arts background. We were both in ninjutsu together. And he walked up to me and I was bouncing at a bar and was like, hey, I got this thing. It's kind of like what I'm doing. He's doing his yoga teacher training. And he's like, it's like yoga and martial arts and meditation together. I think you might really dig it. And so I was like, sign me up. Like, went and started geeking out with him, and he started teaching me. And then it turned into an every Sunday thing where we would practice nonstop and like pick up new skills and meet up and share again. Or then when we started spinning fire, he taught me fire safety, the protocols, fire breathing, fire eating. And then we just kind of ran crazy with it. And then within a 5-year span of that, I'm not saying it's blown up yet, but it's blown up now. Like, there's major festivals, like workshop retreat weekends that happen throughout the entire U.S.
There's something coming up this month that we'll let you share. It's here in Louisville. Okay.
One of them is. Okay. One of them's here, one's in Bloomington, Indiana.
Gotcha. You know, with every, you know, poi, how this derived or started in some other, you know, from other culture. What was, like you mentioned India, right? What was it for entertainment purposes, you know, when they first created this or started this, or was there some type of a company? What was the concept?
There's a lot of different things. I think some of it was all ritualistic. Okay. Like a lot of the stuff that was based back in the day, these indigenous cultures, especially if you look at Native American with the hoop dance, it was like a ceremonial dance that was made to like kind of represent the creation of the universe, the 7 spheres, the flower of life, and all those different objects. Yeah. With India, I didn't do enough research to find out, besides like knowing that fire is a creative primal force that is very destructive and beautiful, and it's always captivated us since the beginning of time. So, I mean, I guess if they were utilizing it in a way mixed with yoga and movement, it probably was both entertainment, performance, and probably a little something ritualistic, maybe ceremonial behind there, but I'm not 100% sure in that sense. But now it's all the above. Some people it's a hobby. Some people it's a hobby passion. Some people it's a professional thing they do nonstop, teaching or performing. And to other people, it's all that pushed together, plus like that mindfulness that comes through it. Because you have to be pretty like body aware the entire time, because if not, you're going to beat the crap out of yourself.
You know, in something like this, if your years or your timeline is true, and you say this has kind of been around since the last 20 years or so, it's what interests me is that what else is out there
that we don't know
about. Either in, you know, obviously just in the big picture, what else, but you know, along the lines of the entertainment, the arts that you're involved with. What is new, what's come up recently that I would say that wasn't around 10 years ago.
I would say the two newest props that I can recognize, if I remember correctly, would be Boogang and Dragon Staff. Now, Boogang is a weird thing. It has very similar...
It sounds like a thing that you...
yeah, right? Yeah. It's an S-shaped staff.
Adult website. But
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. That, or like kind of like seppuku, kind of one of those weird Japanese things. And it might be originated from a Japanese culture. Boogang might be. I'm not sure. But Boogang is an S-shaped staff. And usually it's a little bit more flared, but they consider it S staff. And so if you took like a normal contact or even fire staff and you just twisted one end and twisted the other into like an eye bolt hook, and they have those that are fire and LED, and it kind of mimics a lot of the similar ideas that go with like staff movement or poi terminology, but it's completely different and it's very illusion based. There's this guy that is very well known, like, you know, internet popular and very amazing performer. I'm going to be shot because I can't remember his name. He's from Brazil. But you can look him up and look up Boogang S-Staff, and it's probably the top video of it, and it's very hypnotic looking. The second one I would say is Dragon Staff. Dragon Staff, somebody basically took a normal fire staff or contact staff, which is stick 2 big wicks on the end, and they attached a spoke to it. And that spoke has 4 additional wicks coming off it. And so they clamp on, or they're permanently affixed to the staff, and it completely functions similar to a contact staff, except for the momentum from the extra wicks cause it to continuously roll. So it's kind of a technique of like learning how this thing rolls and twists and moves over your body, and it's extremely cloud pleasing because it's a lot of fire. It's essentially like 9 or 10 wicks, sometimes 12 wicks, or some people have built like 45 or huge wick ones that are called Phoenix staffs. And they're very, very interesting in that sense because they don't function like a normal prop, but they carry some of the functionality that are similar. Outside that, I think people just keep adding more props. Like they keep, besides discovering a new one, they add a new prop to a new situation. Like instead of just 1 poi in each hand, now there's been called 3 poi. So you have 2 poi in one hand, 1 poi in the other, and you do a completely different set of moves, but similar. And then now people have been developing 4 poi to where they have 2 poi in each hand, and they can do very similar moves, but they're a little bit more elaborate.
Which is, I'm getting next, my next question, good segue, is the creativity. Once it's here, what's noodling in your head? You know,
it's insane. It gets insane.
Because then you mentioned fire.
Yeah.
What else are you doing with this thing?
Fire is the main. So contact is the main, or not contact, but the practice poi, which is either like a sock with a ball, water balloon, or a beanbag in it. And then there's contact poi, and those were created because, you ever seen contact juggling? You ever seen Labyrinth? So that little magical ball that came out years ago called Fushigi, that's a guy named Michael Machine that was doing that between Banboing. So a contact juggler that saw that and was a poi spinner took a string and put it through one of those balls, and he created what's considered contact juggling. So all the contact moves you would have from a stage ball, they now interpret into poi. And so you have contact poi, and then you have LED versions, fire versions, flag poi, which are essentially like a string again. Instead of having a ball, it's got a heavier weight, like a beanbag or something in, and it's got this really beautiful, ornate, long flag behind it. So it really accentuates the moves. Like you can actually see what's going on rather than mentally having to picture like the patterns it's creating. You can actually see it happening. Whereas with LED, if somebody's doing what we call a flower, you can see the 4 petals show up because the tracers from the light. But between fire, practice, and contact, and flag poi, I think that's about the extent that would be in that realm, you know, for the most part.
Is someone watching you, an audience, they're mesmerized by the whole visual?
Sure, absolutely.
That's one thing. Share with us the physical part, though.
Oh, the physical part of doing it? It's a lot going on at once, especially if they're on fire. Not only are the fire that we use, the fuel we use is about 1,500 degrees. And so it's very loud. It sounds like what some people refer to as like a jet engine going off, like flying around. Because all you hear is these loud whooshes. That's the fire just raging around you, and it's very hot, obviously. And so your mind goes into a place where it's like, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit. But at the same time, it's like total peace and joy and happiness because like you're creating visual light, you're moving, but the physical exertion behind it is insane at first. Like it gets to points where you can't even hold your arms up for more than 5 minutes because like just the shoulder and core workout that comes from it. And that's if you're just a stand spinner, if you stand in one spot and knock out cool tech. Like there's some people that are very elaborate that roll around on the ground, that kneel and stand, and so they're basically doing like hardcore cardio. And it just depends on how long, because most of the time if I'm spinning for myself, practicing, I can spend anywhere from 1 to 3 hours. You know what I mean? Just depends on how into it I'm in and what music I'm listening to that's driving me, or if I'm trying to learn something or put together a routine. But if it's like general fire spinning for like a festival or for an event, it's like a 5-minute thing.
Okay.
It's like
so
3 to 5 minutes.
your routine is basically 3 to 5.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I mean, you can design a huge one with like the practice ones if you wanted, but who wants to sit? I mean, I would. If somebody was super talented, I'd watch somebody spin it for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, yeah. But most people, like 3 to 5 minutes to a song, you know what I mean? Put together a cool piece, beginning, end, couple of big tricks, fancy stuff, and then on to the next guy, you know, or next girl, or next whatever, maybe.
So is there, how many people actively are doing this in town?
In town here,
Yeah.
oh man, there's a ridiculous amount.
Is there?
I really began to understand that. So there's a flow jam that happens every Thursday and every Wednesday. Wednesdays is now happening, taken over by somebody else. The gentleman I mentioned earlier was running it, but obviously is not now. But this young lady that runs Unity Church, or runs the flow jam at Unity Church on Brook. And so every Thursday, it's a free meetup from 6 o'clock until 9. And it's pretty much like show up. It's a gymnasium. You got like, 30, 40-foot ceilings.
At night.
Yeah. And pretty much you can go and like hang out and spin. And there every week is anywhere between 20 and 30 people that show up. And that's like small numbers.
Where is this at?
That's Brook Street, downtown Louisville. It's a Unitarian church. It used to be the old Catholic diocese.
Now, is there like a Facebook group or page?
There is. Unity, it's I think it's called Louisville Flow Jam is the group.
Okay.
And then Unity Flow Jam is the one that happens there. Yeah. And then they do another one at Rainbow Blossom, not far out, but like by the intersection of Waterson. The Bardstown Rainbow Blossom out by the Art Center and all that. That's by I think it's the Heines Brothers, if I remember correctly. That's out there. But they meet up, same thing. The only difference is it's a different location. And then during the summer, we usually meet up depending on where we want. Like a lot of people meet up at the Witch's Hat up in Cherokee Park or at Big Rock, and we'll meet up there, and we'll either go there as a group and spin fire, and sometimes it's 3 to 5 of us, sometimes a lot. For like this last week, when the situation that took place, a bunch of people got together for this gentleman's memorial.
You're going there to just hang out and do this,
yeah,
or are you doing it to perform for people?
I mean, I'm sure some people are taking it as like watching you, because like I mean that's the beauty of this community interaction is like when you go, you're not intentionally trying to perform, you know what I mean? You're just like jamming to the music and just dancing or being danced.
Right.
And then in the process of that, somebody may walk over and be like, dude, what the hell was that pattern you were doing? And then you end up geeking out with like 6, 7 people at once and breaking down this move, and then it turns into this like 5. And it's the same thing with juggling. We have some amazing jugglers in town. We got a guy named Marcus and Lee that have been juggling for, Marcus is like old school. I think he's been juggling for like probably 20 years. And then Lee's been juggling for, as long as I've known him, at least 8 or 9 years. And they're exceptionally talented. So there's some wonderful jugglers in town and a ton of hoopers too. But boy, I would say I would like to guess around like 200 plus people that I know of. Wow. And I still get lost because like I'll be walking down Bardstown Road, or I'll be at a random like EDM concert in Zanzibar, and there'll be a dude in the corner with really expensive LED toys. And I'm like, hi, how are you? My name's Mike. What's your name? And like never known him, been spinning for 10 years. He just doesn't go to the jams because this is not his cup of tea. And I'm just like, okay, who's the next person I'm going to meet? Because like people would walk into like at bars I'd work at or be at, and they'd have like, I don't have one on now, but there's a couple of companies that make like flow orientated clothing, like Modec Designs and a few others, and they have like a bunch of props on them made into geometrical shapes. Not everybody buys that shirt, you know what I mean? So like when I see somebody with those shirts, I'm just like, okay, what do you do? Like, what do you spin? How are you into this? Where did you get in? Tell me your story. Tell me where you came from and what this has done for you. Tell me,
is this would be labeled as something part of the underground scene, or I mean, is it getting it?
I mean, is it getting popular? Yeah, man. It's getting popular to a point where you're seeing it on TV shows. I mean, you always see fire breathing and fire eating. I noticed. You see those on different circus shows. You see them on different like sets for different movies or TV shows. But when it comes to poi and hoop, it's gotten to the point now where like just the other day we had this. Do you know what Fortnite is? The game that everybody's playing. Yeah. So I don't play. This badass young girl named Rachel Lust, and she is a beast of a hooper, and she is incredibly talented. She has a very specific skill set the way she hoops. Fortnite actually copied one of her routines for emotes, and so that's going.
Is she local?
No, where is Rachel from? That might be a phone a friend question again.
No,
she's
fine.
not from here, but she's taught here a few times, been here for workshops. But they stole like you look at it and it's like, oh yeah, it's totally Rachel Lust stuff. And so Fortnite is now getting to the point where they're stealing like hooping moves for an emote for a character. And so in that sense, it's growing. Toys R Us, well, the old days, they sell this company called Spinballs. And one of our friends, Ben's, I think, sponsored, and our friend Liz is sponsored by them too. And it's a very simple setup. It's like an LED ball on these very small strings, and it comes with an instructional DVD. It's like the fushigi. Do you remember the fushigi? That magical floating ball?
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, that's contact juggling.
Okay.
They just never called it contact juggling. They called it magical floating ball.
Yeah,
and it came with a DVD. It was like $10. People hated it. People loved it. Whatever it may be. But now, poi it's become huge, especially in the EDM scene. Like, if I may, in a sense, as an example, there was a festival in my hometown called Summer Camp Music Festival. I think it's like 130,000 people, maybe 70,000. And I started going out to it to find other people in my area that spun or juggled. In the first couple of years I went out there, I befriended some groups from St. Louis and Chicago and other places. But that first year, there was, you probably saw maybe 5 or 10 people with practice poi or LED poi. And it was super easy to find them because you'd see these people flailing things through the air. And then you go back the next year and it grows. And like the last year I went, which was probably 5 years ago, maybe now, there was hundreds of people. Like, you would look out into the crowds there in Grismatic and you would just see like hundreds of people with this. There's a company in California called Flow Toys, and they make these really awesome, very accessible, very soft, very wonderfully well-made lifetime guarantee LED poi. And you see everybody with those. Like, the only way you know about those is you have a friend that knows about them, or you went and found the website, or you heard about them. And the fact that there's thousands of people at an event that has that, or has these super expensive hula hoops with these LEDs in them, they're like $350 like a pop. And there's hundreds of, they get stupid expensive. Oh, wow. Like a nice pair of like LED, like pixel poi that have like these, you can look them up. Like Ignis makes great ones, Pyroterra makes good ones, but they're $1,500 for a set of 2.
Good Lord.
And now they are Light Show Plus. Like, they are the fancy, crazy LED pictures you see going around. They are made by those props. There's a reason. I mean, I shouldn't say there's a reason why they are that expensive. They're engineered very well. And they are beautiful. But some props are not that expensive. Like a pair of contact poi is like $30, $40, depending on how fancy you want to make them, what tethers and stuff. But yeah, it's definitely grown in popularity quite a bit, more than I ever expected, because it used to be like a secret Masonic handshake. You met somebody else that spun fire from another town, you're like, awesome, and then you would hang out and become like best buds, and then you would go and travel and kick it with their crew and spin fire with them for a weekend, and they would come up during your jam and kick it. Like, when I used to run the jam in Peoria, from where I'm from, I used to have a group from Champaign, Kankakee, Bloomington, Illinois, Springfield, Illinois, sometimes Chicago, Indiana, and even St. Louis that would come up to the jams. And so, like, that was the cool thing, because it became like this kind of knit family where we had this one hobby in common. And then now it's like you can go to almost any major city and find a group of thousands. Wow. It's just bonkers how much it's grown.
I want to, if you don't mind, you touched on a friend of yours.
Yeah.
Who was involved in all this.
Absolutely.
That you recently lost.
Sure.
I knew the name, but I didn't know him. But then all of a sudden, he was everywhere on my news feed, and a lot of my friends, our acquaintances, were all putting stuff out there about him. Who is this guy, and what was he about here in the...
So his name was Matt O'Daniel, or Matt O'Flows. He ran a company, which is his fire performance company, that was called Art After Dark. Matt was solely responsible for 90% of the, I would say 90 to 100% of the development of the flow scene, the object manipulation scene here in town. like, he constantly was giving people lessons.
About when did he start?
When I first, like 9-10 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah,
so he's one of the
OGs.
OGs.
Well, in a sense like that, we call it OG if you've been like 10 years plus. I think I'm like 13 or 14 years in. And
he's earned it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
But the OGs are a few other kids that are from like California or the East Coast that have been doing it for 30 years. Okay. And like, they come out, but they're like, it's like a god coming back from the dead. You're just like, you still spin? Well, let's go. But most of them now are jugglers. They just made the transition. Okay. But Matt was pretty much responsible for that. He hosted the jams too. He hosted the one that happened at the Witch's Tree, and he hosted the one that happened at Rainbow Blossom during the winters. So he was pivotal in this. People learning flow arts, people performing. He gave a lot of people their first chance at performing. Like, a lot of people that either just got in or he got to know and realize like, hey, they're super talented, or they're super passionate, or they're like, yo, I want to do this. So a lot of the people, if you look up Art After Dark and you see these people like Bill or Will Fenton, or you see like Terry Kendall and all these different people, like he worked with them one-on-one gigging. Like he loved this.
Yeah,
like he loved it.
Terry's
yeah.
good.
And so Terry, she's a boss.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah. Badass.
But so in that sense, yeah, he was pivotal for the scene. He was one of the first people I met down here years ago because he taught at Flow Camp, you know what I mean? And so I met him there, went to his workshops, got to geek out with him and hang out with him. And then over the years, like that's kind of how we would see each other, because most of the time I would only be down here once a year. Okay. And it'd be for a weekend. So it'd be like, you know, come down to Louisville. Like,
so you had, when you were living in Illinois,
yeah.
you were making the trip here.
Yeah, I traveled a lot.
Okay.
Pretty much like from middle 20s to like early 30s.
Okay.
I traveled all over Illinois, and then I made my way to the West Coast. I've now made my way to the East Coast.
But you frequented Louisville.
Yeah, every year, 2 times a year, if not more.
Yeah.
Depending on like if I was coming through back from something, I'd stop and hang out and hit people up and get beers or food or just say hi. But if not, I was here at least 2 times a year teaching, and it was always fascinating because it was always so much warmer here than home. Like January there was like -30, and January here was like 45, and I was like, this is great. I can wear a hoodie. This is perfect. But yeah, Matt had a lot of influence in a lot of things down here. It's really awesome to see, and that was like kind of what I was like referring to with how many people, like when they did a memorial burn for him at Cherokee Park, there was like I think like 70 people that showed up.
Oh, wow.
And there were people that started spinning back when he started spinning, and taught people that don't really spin anymore, but they still went out and burned like in his honor, you know. And I met a bunch of people that have been spinning for 5 years that I've never seen before. Yeah. And like these kids were going out and spinning, and I'm just like, who is this kid? Like, the kid's got some serious skill. I'm surprised I haven't met him yet. Right. And he's just one of those people that just, you know, she or he doesn't come to the jam type of thing. Yeah.
An icon.
Yeah, he'll live forever. It's gotten to the point now that I'm surprised somebody hasn't erected some crazy statue that just stays on fire permanently. And people are doing not hairpins, but the festy pins you see. One of our friends from Michigan that he knew. And that's the thing about the flow scene is like once you get into this underground culture, like I said, you meet these people, but depending on where you go and what you decide to do with it and what you meet, like Matt traveled a lot. Like Matt's been in and out of Florida. He's been to Texas. I'm pretty sure he's been to California at least. I know he came up north to Chicago and Illinois and different parts of Indiana. So when his like visitation happened, we had people from all those states calling and showing up and being like, you know, so he was had a pretty wide breadth of teaching and connection with people.
Here's to
no
Matt.
shit. Yeah, to Matt.
There you go. This on March 21st, the Louisville Poi Intensive 2019 Midwest Tour. What's this all about?
Mr. Drexler. So Ben is an acquaintance of ours, or friend, if you may say. He's very good friends with my girlfriend, Kat. And I've known him for a while. He's been spinning for a very long time, and he'll be in town during that time. And he's offering 3 workshops from himself at Unity. He's on a Midwest tour right now, so he'll be touring through Illinois, Indiana, Cincinnati, I think Tennessee, and maybe a few other states. And so he'll be dropping by to offer Poi intensives at the Unity on that date. Ben's background is ridiculous. Dude's a musician. He's a whiz at history. If you ever go to like DC and you want to tour the museums, he's your guy. Loves dinosaurs, and he's an incredibly talented teacher and an incredibly talented spinner. He has put the work in. Like if you type in Poi, how to do such and such, you're going to see 90% of his videos.
Really?
Over the last probably, I don't know, maybe 10, 13 years, he has put a ridiculous amount of work into reformatting and refining what he does, and then putting it out to the public, and then going and then teaching that. And like I think he taught at Flow Camp the last year, and he's taught like probably, if not every major festival or minor festival that's been in the States, I guess you'd say.
Looks like there's 3 classes. I'm going to go through each one and let you give us a description or breakdown of Body Tracers 101.
That's I love that stuff. So Body Tracers is the bee's knees for me. That's essentially like a way of spinning Poi and tracing lines on the body. So you have like these wouldn't be considered invisible lines, but if you take the context of like a line drawn underneath your arm and on top of your arm and around your head and then back down one side, that would be considered like you would trace that line. Or we have vertical or horizontal lines that we trace through and across the body. So instead of like these open patterns that you're spinning around or in front of your body, you're essentially, like we joke about rubbing lotion on the skin, make it look sexy.
Right.
And so like you're doing these patterns that are very, very, very close to touching the body the entire time as you're moving your arms across and spinning the poi around you. And so he's going to be teaching a body tracer class, which everybody loves it. I'm pretty sure like almost every poi spinner I've ever met, or anybody that's a novice to like insanely advanced, still loves body tracers, mainly because A, they look amazing. They're very difficult in a sense to master long term. But then we have the Russian spinners, the Russian tech spinners, the people that spin poi in Russia. And if it wasn't for them and one guy named Leo, like we probably wouldn't have a big summation of this information, of this style. And they have made it very popular. They have made that style of spinning very popular because it looks so elegant and beautiful and graceful. So that's the body tracer class.
The art of prop performance.
Now, I'm gonna be honest. Ben has a background in dance. I think he did modern dance and a few other different types of contemporary forms like that, and was with the dance troupe for a while, if that's the right term. If not, I'm sorry, Ben. But I couldn't tell you exactly what those are because, I mean, there's a brief descriptor on the website, like on the Facebook page, that tells you what he's getting into in the dance movements. But I can basically generalize in a simple way of saying, like, when it comes to spinning poi, a lot of people learn the technique and they have this really problem. Well, I shouldn't say it's a problem. Some people don't give a shit. But they stand still and they don't move. They don't accentuate their body. They don't smile at the crowd if they're performing. Yeah. They stay in one spot and just like bang out awesome tricks.
The last sentence in this description says, "Come learn to tell a story or share an idea through the craft."
Yeah.
So it is some type of a choreographed.
Yeah. He's going to teach people basically, I wouldn't say dance move. He's not going to go out there and teach you how to do like Russian barrel rolls. Yeah. But he's going to at least teach you like the foundations of movement and dynamic between like levels, using your legs, pirouettes, turning. A lot of stuff a lot of people don't get into right off the bat because it's so much already just to learn how to spin these swinging balls around your body first, let alone being able to like accentuate this movement and tell a story through dynamic movements and energy.
Gotcha.
And so Ben does that, and I've definitely taken I think I've taken this one class or the next class before, like years ago.
Then the last one is the poi dance master class.
Yeah, that'll probably be like the insanity level. Like his classes are never geared to be overwhelming. Like he can teach the techiest and the most hard and difficult classes, and he can teach the most elegant and simplify them so anybody can learn them. So even though that's an advanced class, he probably is going to have enough to offer everybody at all skill levels in that class. It should be quite phenomenal. I'm doing all three of them. Kat's doing all three of them. I'm doing all three of them. Quite a few friends. We've been he's staying with us when he's coming in town.
Oh, cool.
And so we're looking forward to having him down here. And I think the community is super stoked. Like when I kind of like mentioned it to a few, he's kind of like, if you just started spinning poi, like you know a lot about Ben and some of these other guys I've name dropped throughout the process, and they become like these. I don't want to say poster boy because that seems rude, and I don't want to say idol because I think that's giving something to the nature that maybe is not what we want. But they've become very iconic, and into the point where people get like literally starstruck from meeting
They're
these dudes.
A celebrity. I mean, in a sense, they are. Yeah. Okay.
And so people get really off caught. And so I remember when I told a handful of people at the jam, I was just like, "Hey, we're talking to Ben right now about coming through."
Is he getting chicks from it? I mean,
I don't know, man.
The whole rock star thing.
I mean, in the flow community, it's such a weird thing, and I'm not going to even step into that. I don't want to get myself into trouble. But yeah, I mean, you got to think about it. If you're into spinning balls on string or waving sticks in the air or playing with plastic circles, and you meet another girl or guy that throws down hard, that's badass, and they hold that presence as well as that energy, of course,
there's a connection.
It's going to drive you because also you have a hobby that you share with what, 1 in 10,000 people, maybe.
Right.
And so when you meet somebody that shares that, it's like total attraction. It's kind of like peacocking. You know what I mean?
That's a good point.
But like not in a bad way.
No, I'm with you.
Yeah.
I'm with you.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So yeah, I'm sure the ladies pay attention to him. I'm sure he gets paid attention to both
if you buy into the everything happens for a reason.
Yeah.
And you know, this is not something that a bunch of people are going to be.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, Kat and I are together. I mean, that's the thing is like she's a badass. She spins giant ass Russian fans, and then she does poi as well. She does hoops. She does burlesque. All this, and like I just spin things. And stand there and smile. You know what I mean? And so like I'm sure there was some level. I know it was on my behalf with her because there's like she's badass firefighter and she does these big ass fire fans. I'm just like this chick holds a presence. Right. I dig it.
Right. Now, this is, again, March 21st. It's a Thursday from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. at the Unity of Louisville Unity.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yep.
South Brook Street. That's interesting. I have to share this. A friend of mine, when he was telling me, or he saw that I was going to talk about poi and all that, he's like, he's one has been to watch some of this stuff. He says the best way, this is him talking, he gets high before it.
Oh, sure.
And he's like, the visual.
Oh, it's insane.
Takes it to a different level.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And then he's like, he was told, try DMT. You know,
yeah.
He's like, maybe take it to that level.
That would be over. And I couldn't imagine, because like I see naturally those tracers without having to use anything.
Exactly.
And that's something that I've loved, because I can watch people spin and see these beautiful patterns unfold, especially like if it's at the right time of day, like right at dusk, and with fire. Like you blink while somebody's spinning fire and those shapes just burn into your like visual perspective. So you're just seeing somebody create mandalas with fire. So that's like kind of the cool concept of what we're doing. We're creating like living, moving geometrical shapes.
Right.
But man, if you did DMT or something on top of that, that would be.
Well, I guess that's where I'm going with this, is that you know what you're doing. And you know the reaction, you know, for just a sober audience.
Yeah.
Does that visual take it, you know?
Sure it does. So I'm one of those strict people. I'm like one of the kind of like square kids.
Okay.
I definitely love my beer and all those things, but I've never used while spinning because of the few times when I was younger and spinning.
Well, not used.
But, sure.
But
I don't want to die. I like fire. I don't want to die. Like, it's
safety
intense.
still. There's a safety issue.
It does take it a level. Like if I could on a piece of paper have, or just in a video log, the amount of faces I have melted over the years, like at festivals, you know what I mean? Like, and I just look out during a tipper set.
Figuratively, not literally.
Yeah, literally, yeah. And like, I look out and all I see is like pupils, and I'm just like, oh, I'm throwing down hard.
Yeah.
And I just go hard.
That's how you keep your, keep it up. And
I've heard people talk for hours about it, because like, they're already in that state of mind where conversation's easy. And so on top of that, having someone try to digest what they saw and give it to you, it's like life-changing. I have met so many people that like I've never met them. They've seen me spin fire a handful of times, and then I'll run into them at an event and they're like, dude, you're the one that inspired me to pick up poi and learn. I'm just like, thank you. I mean, like, it's a really good compliment. I'm awesome. Like, how's it going? And I talked to him for a few minutes and like, dude, I was tripping balls. And like, I just got the message you were sharing through your dance. And I was like, that's a line I don't think I ever thought I'd hear, but sure, man, that sounds great. Thank you. It's an amazing compliment,
It's a positive.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, well, I'll definitely want to do, I want to come to one of these events.
Definitely.
I've not seen it in person.
When's the next
so
good
we'll
one?
We'll definitely stay in the loop, and we'll get to one.
If not, we're just keep in touch with me, Terry, and everybody. We got a couple of gigs coming up together, so.
One other thing too. There's a couple more things we want to talk to as we're kind of winding down with our time. The whole brewery scene.
Yeah.
I mean, give a little your background, because you're a little bit of a
beer snob.
Know-it-all.
There is an amazing brewing scene here. My thing is, I'm just a home brewer. You know what I mean? I've been brewing for a long time. I brewed for a small period of time for about 2 years with a company that I worked on a 4-barrel system and did barrel aging and weird hybrids. I like making wellness beers, I guess you'd say, is the way my friend discovers it. Like, for example, I did a collab with Upland Brewing out of Indianapolis, or Bloomington, Indianapolis. Their brewer and I did a chaga mushroom guajillo pepper imperial milk stout. And chaga mushrooms is this really amazing mushroom that has a ton of benefits. I mean, in the new age scene, it opens up your third eye. But in the health scene, it's antioxidants, it's anti-aging, anti-wrinkling. It helps with like rejuvenation of your skin, detoxing. And so I really enjoy when I make beers, putting something into them. If that means doing something experimental as putting a bunch of crystals and rocks around it and testing it and seeing what happens, if that means like putting sage or yarrow or something into the beer to see if it's got an effect. Because if we're going to be drinking stuff, you know what I mean? Like, I kind of looked at like, what else can we be doing with it to kind of change the direction of what we're doing? The brewery scene here in Louisville's popping. It's growing, and it's crazy how fast. Like, when we go to the Brewers Association meetings, they talk about how it's growing, but it's growing at a curve that we're behind the rest of the states. But the growth in what we've had, I think they said it's 50% in 1 year,
that's
which is bonkers. Because just in like the 5 or 6 years that I've been here, it went from being like 2, a Monarch. So yeah, Monarch, Great Flood, and Cumberland were the only like 3 or 4 that I knew of. And then Lexington had Ethereal, and then West 6 and Country Boy. And then now we have, man, there's, I mean, you can pretty much drive 10 minutes in any direction. Oh, Against the Grain. Sorry, Against the Grain was huge. We went there. That was like the first place I ever went. But there's a lot now, and it's growing so ridiculously how fast. And like Tailspin this year was a great showing. There was a lot of people out there.
I hated missing that.
Yeah. Have you gone every year?
No, I had the guys on, the people who organized it. They were on the pocket. You
Yeah.
and what's the
Trevor?
Well, Trevor was on Tish, was it?
Sure.
Yeah, and just and some other people involved in there, but that was amazing.
This year was the best, in my opinion, but I don't know if it was. I'm not sure if it was the best because I knew more people. Like the first year I went, like I was just here like maybe a year and a half in. And I didn't really know anybody. I ended up hanging out in the booth with like the New Holland guys and just drinking one of their sours and just shooting the shit. I knew a couple of brewers, but nothing crazy. But then over the last couple of years of doing a couple of collabs and hanging out and getting to know more people, like I've met a ton of people in the brewery scene. And plus I got to juggle. There's a brewery that just opened up in Ludlow called Bierkus. And so like one of the guys that was performing with the head brewer is the dude I've gigged with before. I think his name's like Dharmesh Bhagat. And so I ended up like juggling with all 3 of them for like during the middle of the beer fest, which was probably my highlight. Not even the fact of like bringing 6 beers. Off. Yeah, showing off in front of everybody.
Yeah, exactly. It's always, you know, it's not showing off unless you got people in front.
Yeah, it was a cool event though. I really dig it. I hope to maybe do it again. This year was my first year actually brewing beers for Tailspin. And I brewed 6 beers. I did the chaga mushroom beer that I was telling you about, and I did a variation with coffee and vanilla. I actually did a collab with New Holland too, where we took a Belgian wit, like a Blue Moon base, essentially like a blonde, and we aged it in white wine Syrah barrels for 6 months with lemon and orange peel. And it turned out phenomenal. Like I really enjoyed it. Did a cream ale with coffee and vanilla called Mother's Milk, and then we did a pale ale as well. And it was a blast to do this, but stressful. Brewing from on that level, like we was basically told mid-December that I had to like come up with 6 beers by February. And so I was just like, okay, let's figure it out. And then in the process of that, we had some issues with our glycol machine, which controls the temperature on the beer fermenting. And it crashed twice and fucked up. And so like right in the middle of brewing the Belgian, it was like basically sat warm for a couple more days. It tasted a little bit more like clovey and had some of those like nice flavors to it. But I also didn't like the fact that it sat in there that long. Right. And then when I brewed the pale ale too, I dumped like a bunch of expensive ass like Southern Hemisphere hops in it. Same thing, like got done finishing and then right into fermentation where I was going to transfer it and get it off of everything and let it condition. It's same thing. Glycol machine took a shit, so it sat warm for like 4 days. That's the one beer I wanted to dump. I was just like, it's good, but it needs either 2 weeks to sit or it needs to just be set on fire and thrown down a deep, deep pit.
Right.
But other beers did good. I did a kombucha wild ale for it as well. Blueberries, like 8.5%. I found a way to kind of blend and make it a higher ABV. And so we did one of those. Again, another medicinal beer. But it was a cool event. I look forward to doing some more work in the brewing where I'm hoping in the next like year or two. My goal was to get down here and get a job brewing, at least learn more about the commercial side of it. And I've learned a ton in the last 3 years, but I wouldn't mind doing more work in a brewery at some point. I just haven't made a decision of where it is. I have a bunch of friends that are like, you should start a brewery. And I'm just like, that's a lot of work. And I have to make a lot of decisions to do that happen. And part of me is like, I'd be totally cool with just like being an assistant or a cellarman for like a couple of months just to get more information from people, you know?
Right. Very good. Winding down, there's we were talking before the show started, before we started recording, some of our mutual liking the whole paranormal thing. Well, when it comes to the paranormal, what specific paranormal is your go-to?
I mean, do you want like a long crazy story? Or do you want just like, let's chop it up and make it into simple shit?
Give me something.
I grew up in a house that was haunted. I didn't think it was haunted. I never thought about it. I remember waking up a lot when I was a kid and the mattress would be moving, the pillows would get pulled out type of thing. And my parents were very strict, like Southern Baptist. And so I'd like run into the living room and I'd be like, you know, this is what's going on. And my mom's like, oh, you're falling asleep. It's just your heart rate. And then I'd go back to bed and I'd have dreams about giants standing outside the house, like in purple light hanging out, or like, you know, triangles shooting out of the sky and weird shit, like kid shit. Stuff that I thought was kid stuff. And then I came home.
Was that on? You weren't doing DMT yet?
Not that. Well, I mean, it's in a. So maybe it was like a little overproduced in my brain, and that's what was going on. I was just like slipping through that wormhole accidentally in dreams. But I came home and my parents' pastor from the church was walking around the house with a sage thing and holy water and holy oil and, doing all the doors and all that. And I didn't really process what it was. And then I talked to my dad and I was like, what the hell's going on? Like, what's the deal? And my mom apparently woke up with 3 entities standing at the end of her bed with like light purple eyes, like staring at her, and it scared the shit out of her. And like right after that, the pastor came in and was just like, hey, you got to get rid of all this Native American stuff. You got to get rid of all these animals. You got to get rid of this frog. All these things are satanic symbols. You got to get them out of the house. And so she got rid of them. And all these experiences just kind of sat in the back of my head because I was just like, WTF.
Right.
But I never processed them. And then I heard different stories along the line with my family with different stuff that happened that I was unsure of, but they knew about it. So how did they know about it if they weren't there? So it was being talked about. And then fast forward years later, I think the fascinating thing for me more than anything is mysticism. The ability what consciousness can be done.
Yeah.
I think it's fascinating to look at stuff like sacred geometry. And if you've ever read like Drunvalo Melchizedek stuff, like the Flower of Life, that stuff, I've done his workshops and like, they are fascinating in the work that it does about getting into the heart. But between that and I was very lucky and I met a lady when I was probably like 19 or 20, an older lady that was in her 60s that was a clinical psychologist. And she was a therapist, but then she had some indigenous culture, like Native American heritage in her. And then she was studying with the Swami. So I got to meet like my first Swami at that time.
Oh, wow.
And so in that process, that really kind of ignited this fire into me, that like wisdom and this ability of consciousness. And hearing these stories about like, like Vibuti, like the manifesting the ash through the ashram's hand, and like, Sai Baba, and not so much parlor tricks, but this essence of true wisdom and truth. And that's the stuff that like lay down just gets me all hyped and jittery. Like I love reading about stuff like the Anunnaki, you know what I mean?
Right.
And like Sitchin stuff and the 12th planet and UFOs and aliens, because like, it's not that I don't believe they are real or not real. I've had too many experiences. Like I used to be part of like 3 or 4 UFO groups.
Oh, yeah.
And so I used to go out and do stargazing parties with them. And the stuff that we saw.
The CE5?
Yeah.
Like
well, that was before the CE5.
Okay, also they come back.
So CE5 is, I found out about CE5 recently, like when I moved here, because I was looking for groups like this.
Mm-hmm.
In the group back home I was part of, there was a gentleman that lived on a plot of land like way the hell outside of the city. And we basically all joined together, go out there. He had 2 or 3 pyramids made out of copper and brass with all these adornments and everything you could lay into in different geometrical shapes. He was such a unique guy that he found out a way to take ultraviolet night vision goggles, or took night vision goggles and attached an ultraviolet lamp. And so when that did that, it created a spectrum of light that allowed you to see a bunch of stuff that wasn't there. So it was really strange walking around his yard and seeing these different geometrical shaped spheres floating around, and they'd be different colors. Some of them would be the pictures you see, like ghost pictures,
Really?
But it would be the different colored spheres, and some of them had have shapes. And those are the ones that were bonkers, because you'd be like, you'd see it, and you start walking through the grass trying to like get close to the shape, and it would just keep going away from you. And you would like take off the goggles, put them back on, take off the goggles, put them back on, and be like, put these on real quick and tell me what you see. And they're like, what the fuck is that?
Yeah.
And so being part of those groups gave me a lot of interesting experiences that like, it's very easy for me to go like, yo, UFOs are fucking real. Like I've seen thousands and hundreds of them. I've seen shit that is unexplainable to the eye.
Personally?
Yes.
Okay.
But then the other side of me is just like, is that something we talk about aloud yet? With do we keep that to ourselves type of thing, or
one thing I'm gonna get ready. I'm in the works planning to do, because I'm such a big fan of the whole paranormal.
Yeah.
But not every light in the sky is alien, or not every bump in the dark is something.
Yeah.
But it could be something.
Yeah.
And so I'm getting ready to put together do a full paranormal podcast, and I would love for you to come on, be a part of it. I'm gonna have like 2 or 3 people.
Yeah. And see, I love debunking it as much as possible.
Exactly.
Like there's been experiences that I've had with friends, like for example, a weird one. I got a bunch of friends that are very much like open to this stuff, but they're not sold. And we've had a lot of experiences around each other that we've never been explained, but we've never really like dived into. We were just kind of like, that's cool. I'm sitting in my friend Dustin's like living room after a night of somebody's like funeral. We've all been like hanging out, having drinks, so on and whatnot. Everybody's pretty much gone home for the night except for like 10, 15 of us, and we're sitting there drinking like bourbon over ice, shooting the shit. And he had a bunch of these magnetic spheres that you can click together to make different shapes. The niece and nephews were playing with. So they were gone. We had them all grouped up on the counter sitting. And out of nowhere, one of them on there popped off. hit the counter, his granite island, rolled across it, dropped and hit the ground dead, and then rolled all the way across at a pace, stopped, and then took another 90-degree turn underneath his couch. And both of us were just sitting there. And we weren't talking about Paranormal. We weren't even talking about the stuff. We were talking about how much we like Woodford Reserve Double Oak. Do you know what I mean? We were talking about that. And so we went and got the ball. We put it back up on the table where we thought roughly it was. And we dropped it off that table like 15 times to see where it landed, to try and mimic what it did. But the thing is, it rolled off at such a pace that allowed it to drop and stop, not completely, but slow down, and then start to roll on its own. And so we did it like 10, 15 times, and then we dropped it from different heights to see what was going on. And then we rolled it on the ground towards the chair, and not once did it go the right path. And not once did it stop and then go underneath there. Because I was like, Dustin he just built this addition to his house. And I was like, you fucked up your floors, yo. Yeah. And we tested it, and not once did it do that. And so we were just like bamboozled. We didn't really talk about it. We were like, well, that's fascinating. What do you think? And he's like, I don't know. And I was like, I don't either. And he's like, that's the best answer ever, is I don't know. And it's like, it's fascinating, but we don't know what the fuck that was. And we may never know. It might be like when we finally do that final great fart and die. And then afterlife, we're like, oh, it was mom. And mom was fucking with us.
Yeah, something like that. Mike, thanks for coming and hanging out with me. Again, when I do the paranormal thing, I think you would lend to that.
We talked about, the whole coast to coast thing. Bread and butter.
Good stuff, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Thank you.